Alright, welcome to our 17th lesson in science. I have a mind teaser question for you. Which plant has male and female flowers at different points on its body? Can you guess? Alright. I hope you are thinking of maize. Then you are correct. Maize is correct. And some foreign plants like oak, O-A-K, and pine. They are special plants with the male and female flowers at different points on their body. Yes, we are still looking at cycles, and today we'd like to touch on describing flowering, pollination, and fertilization as stages of maize or okra. In our previous lesson, we touched on 2 stages of life cycle of okra or maize plants. Can you remember? Yes, we touched on germination and seedling as the first 2 stages of the life cycle. So let's begin with the 3rd stage. So we are looking at flowering. Today we are looking at flowering. Now, what is the meaning of flowering as the 3rd stage of life cycle of plants? By saying that it is a process whereby a mature plant produces flowers. Flower is the reproductive organ of the plant that forms fruit and seeds. Remember that both okra and maize bear flowers. Now, while okra plant bears bisexual flower, that is, flower that has both male and female reproductive parts, the maize plant bears male and female flowers at different points on its body. So that is quite different, or a difference between the okra plant and the maize plants. So let's look at a typical flowering maize plant and flowering okra plants. Good. So you can see we have a typical flowering maize plant bearing the male and female flower at 2 different points on the body. Now the top part, what we call the tassel, is the male flower that produces the pollen grains. The female one is the one having the hair-like structure which receives the pollen grains from the male flower. So this is a picture of a flowering maize plant. Then of course okra with these beautiful flowers, almost like rose, is also having both the male and female parts in the same flower. So it is called a bisexual flower. Alright, let's move on to look at the next stage after flowering. After the flowers are born, what is the next stage? We have what we call pollination. And this is a popular word you have come across severally in your previous classes. So it's nothing new to you. So the same old definition, it is the transfer of pollen grains from the anther to the stigma of a flower. The transfer of pollen grains from the anther to the stigma of a flower. We're saying that both okra and maize plants are self-pollinated. And what do you mean by self-pollination? Is the transfer of pollen grains from the anther of a flower to the stigma of the same flower or another flower on the same plant. So let's take note of that. Now before we move on, Even though maize can undergo self-pollination, it can also undergo what we call cross-pollination, where the pollen grains from the male flower on one maize plant is transferred onto the female flower on another maize plant. So that is cross-pollination. So that's what I'm saying, that in addition, maize plants can be cross-pollinated. So let's look at the picture. Good. This self-pollination in a typical maize plant. So the red marking illustrates the movement of pollen grains from the male flower to the female flower. Good. Now let's move on to the third stage of flowering plants. That's maize or okra. And that is fertilization. Good. Fertilization. Now, what is fertilization? It is the fusion of the male and female gametes or sex cells to form a zygote. So a zygote is simply a cell formed from the fusion of the male and female sex cells in the flower. Okay, we're saying that after fertilization, let's take note of this, the ovule found in the ovary, the ovule develops into seeds, and the ovary, which is the outer covering of the female part, develops into what? Fruit. So let's look at a picture of what we are saying. Very good. So this is a typical way or process of fertilization. For our level, let us look at this simple explanation, but there's a more complex explanation to fertilization that you learn in your next level of education, that's senior high school. So in this diagram, we have a pollen grain from the anther of a flower, and this pollen grain contains male sex cells. Now, what happens here is the pollen grain absorbs water or moisture from the style of the female productive part called the pistil. This is the style of the pistil. So as the pollen grain absorbs water, its swells are burst open to form what we call pollen tube. The pollen tube glows through the style towards what we call the micropyle. The micropyle is a tiny hole found inside the ovary. Now, the ovary has not been labeled here, but this is the ovary. It's the external structure here, wall. So whatever is happening here is happening inside the ovary. So it passes through the tiny hole to meet the ovule. Now the ovule contains the female sex cells. We have double fertilization here because inside the pollen tube are two male sex cells. Each has a cell in the ovule that it fertilizes with. But at the end of the day, there will be zygote form and there will be fruit wall form. Alright, so this is how fertilization is explained for our level. In our next lesson, we shall look at dispersals following fruit and seed formation, and we'll bring an end to this topic. So what have we learned today? Today we looked at 3 other stages of life cycle of okra or maize plant. These stages follow seedling or young plants, and they are flowering, pollination, and fertilization. Each of these stages was explained in detail. You can as well discuss the summary of what we have learned today with your mommy, daddy, or your sibling. Now, let's look at our assignment 17. This assignment in this assignment, you are supposed to copy and complete the following sentence. So write all the sentences as you see them here in your exercise book and fill in the spaces. Make sure you underline the spaces, so that marking will be easier. Fill the spaces with the correct expressions. All right. Thanks for your patience. Meet you again in our next lesson. Bye-bye.